the U.S. mission to South Africa yesterday tweeting, there's an update on the U.S. refugee admissions for Afrikaners, consistent with President Trump's executive order on addressing egregious actions of the Republic of South Africa, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security to promote and prioritize humanitarian relief, including consideration of eligibility for admissions and resettlement to the United States for Afrikaners in South Africa who are victims of unjust racist discrimination. That's according to the United States. And then it says there's information, there's an email address. And they also reminded that it's absolutely free. But I speak now to Stefanie De Saude Darbandi, immigration law specialist at DSD Immigration Attorneys. Good morning. Stephanie, appreciate your time. The US also categorizes what does refugee status mean. What happens if a citizen of this country or any other country says, I'm going to seek refugee status in a third country? What happens to the original citizenship, Stephanie?
So, as a general rule, nothing. Refugee status is granted based on the principle of providing protection to individuals who are fleeing persecution, conflict, or dangers. But the assumption is that it's temporary. The refugees will always return to their original country once things settle or when things improve, unless, of course, and this happens with a lot of refugees, is that they apply for and acquire once they become eligible for permanent residence or citizenship in the host country. I mean, it happens in South Africa as well. We have some refugees that have been here for 20, 30 years and then apply for permanent residence and citizenship. It would be the same for South Africa. So there's no law that revokes South African citizenship once you become a refugee. We only have that automatic loss provision, which I think you're aware was successfully challenged by the DA in the court to be unconstitutional. But other than that, the citizenship status is intact until the South African formally renounces the South African citizenship status.
The statement by the U.S. mission to South Africa talks about eligibility for U.S. refugee resettlement for disfavored ethnic minority Afrikaners. Who makes the determination of what an Afrikaner is? If they were to say white Afrikaans-speaking South Africans, I would understand. You've nailed a descriptor to the mast. Maar ek is eerste taal Afrikaans sprekende Suid-Afrikaan, is ek nie 'n Afrikaner nie. How will the U.S. decide?
Well, one wonders what Trump's agenda is, but, he'll have his own set of requirements. And of course, he'll have a reason to justify that if he is, only choosing one class of persons. But it varies. Like South Africa, for example, we only issue refugee status or recognition to people who are fleeing war, fleeing persecution. If some people, for example, are not allowed to be homosexual in their country and where there's no war, but if they return, they'll be killed. And people like that will get refugee status in South Africa, but not economic migrants, for example. So it really depends on the eligibility that America puts out and their set of requirements and whether people tick their boxes.
What about return to South Africa? You mentioned the Concord ruling about dropping one's citizenship status. But what about people who take up this offer and then want to return at a later stage? Could they be prevented by the South African government?
So the general rule is that if you have refugee status in a host country and you return to the country that you're seeking refuge from, it's considered re-availing yourself and the refugee status would be cancelled. So again, the granting of refugee status to South Africans, it doesn't affect their citizenship status. So they can return at any stage. I think the only exception would be if, for example, South Africa were to go to war with America. Then they might have certain legal consequences for South African nationals who are in the enemy state. But other than that, they're free to return. The citizenship is intact. They cannot be deprived of their South African citizenship status. And as I said, other than this automatic loss provision, which we're simply waiting for the Constitutional Court to confirm the Supreme Court ruling before it takes effect, which will mean if the current status is that if someone applies for naturalization in a foreign country other than marriage and whilst being a major, they'll automatically cease to be a South African citizen. But once this ruling is confirmed by the Constitutional Court, this will mean that, it has no bearing on the South African citizenship. You're free to acquire foreign nationality. You don't have to obtain the prior written consent of the minister, and you don't even have to inform Home Affairs of the foreign citizenship.
Stefanie De Saude Darbandi, really appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you very much.